Hello, everybody. It's 4:30. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Roll call, Tina here, Joanne
Here.
Nicole,
Here.
Danielle,
Here.
Stephen.
Here.
I would like to see if we can get a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
I make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Can I get a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? No nays. Moving on to number 4, which is discussion action items, standard-based grading for middle school, including ELA for 2024, 2025 school year and future years. This is a discussion item, so we can start out with any questions. You guys have any questions?
I have a question. When did you start working on this?
That is actually a really great question and something that was not shared at the last time that I spoke with you. So a lot of this work started with our strategic plan. So in 2022, when did we start that?
2021 and 2022.
Okay. So one of the first things in our strategic plan was that select individuals investigate assessment and feedback practices that foster student learning and growth. And so we had a team of teachers get together during the 2022-2023 school year, and they did a book study on standards-based grading. And the ELA team last year, then in 23-24, integrated some of those practices that they learned in that book study into their assessment and grading practices last year. So it was kind of a modified standard-based grading for the ELA, middle school ELA teachers. So yeah, about 2 or 3 years ago is when the work started.
So you already started using this in 23-24,
Yes.
parallel to the other grading?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a reason we didn't know about it? I mean, it was surprising to see this a week before school started without any information ahead of time.
Because it's been, and I guess I see them very closely tied to the strategic plan, that the work that we were doing, I just felt like it was in alignment with it, and I've been having conversations with the leadership team and all of that, so I guess I didn't know that, having a direct conversation with the board was a requirement.
Do you mean when they piloted in last year or this current year?
No,
I mean, I know what you're saying.
I mean,
for
this current year, for instance, the math curriculum change, that also came last minute, which is frustrating because we want to investigate and give support, but without information, it's really hard to do that. So this was another last minute, pretty big change that's pretty controversial. And it could be a great grading system if done well. And there are some schools using it, and it took them 10 years to actually use it. So to flip over to it seems like, wow.
Especially because we had that change already last year. So we had a change last year, which was a big adjustment. Now we're changing it again, which is another big adjustment. Like, it would be great to get that current change under our belt and everything finalized, or not finalized, but comfortable with students, parents, teachers, and having the teachers work not correctly, but try to think of the right word to say it. Have the teachers like go in a direction that like one teacher would be if it was a C, it couldn't be redone. It could be redone if it was a D or an F. One teacher could have it redone if they did a study guide. So if they had the actual correct, or the not correct, 'cause it's everything consistent, retaking of the tests or assignments. One teacher always gave homework. One teacher never gave homework. One teacher did no tests because they didn't want to do the retakes. They just did assessment. So if it was consistent along the board and that got everything comfortable, then maybe going through this change wouldn't feel so be like, oh, well, guess what? Now here's another change. It might just be a little bit more comforting
But also, there's a period of measurement when you adopt a new curriculum or a new grading system, which you just did a year ago, right? So how long does it take to measure that and go, that's great, we have great results, or maybe we need to tweak or adjust or do something different?
So the shifts that we're making are incremental, they're intended to be incremental changes in the direction to make that like full-blown shift then over to fully standards-based grading. So the idea is that you do one thing and work on that, I think kind of to what you're saying, but if I'm hearing you correctly, it sounds like maybe the speed of change is a little bit.
A little too quick.
Okay, that's fair. So the intention is to do this process very slowly and to have that slow rollout. So that's, one content area at a time. The ELA teachers this year, they are the farthest along in their journey as far as having the essential standards identified. And so they made the most sense as far as being the first group to make that shift over. So we are attempting to do it slowly.
And just as a clarification, this is ELA only and only middle school.
6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
And you might have said this already, but I think ever since the strategic plan got started and underway, you've been trying to individualize the
Yes.
attention to the children, and I think this takes that to the next step,
Yes.
which, and as I recall, that individualization, I believe, if you look at the MAP scores and you look at the forward testing, it seems to have helped because the kids that in particular were in the lower range, you're making a difference. The teachers are making a difference. Okay, I just want to clarify, it just seems like we're taking the right steps. You've taken the right steps up to this point, and this is just taking it to the next level, and there's levels beyond this, as far as including math and including other subjects and so forth, so.
Yes.
Terrific.
If I can, first I wanted to say, I'm so sorry I could not attend in person last week. And so it was really an interesting experience to watch it remotely. And so I'm thankful for that avenue. But it also gave me a really unique perspective because I couldn't speak. And so I was compelled just to kind of like listen and to absorb. I think the positives that I saw is that I saw us imperfectly talking about something that could really positively change students, but kind of just really missing how the language and making sure we're all on the same page and feeling really comfortable. Because while on one end of the spectrum you exclaimed, I love change and I love progress, there's others who exclaimed, and rightly so, change doesn't always mean progress. And so I think that's like the really unique part of us all coming together is we're all at different parts of that spectrum and all of that. And as I was hearing the concerns being voiced, I feel like I saw it in like two themes. And I jotted them down. I did email them to Ms. Houston's in advance and included Tina. But I think one, the kind of first thing I heard was, how do we make, last year being the piloted year, and we were made aware at the start of the year that it was happening to the greatest of detail, but you two, like between administration and leadership, that was being piloted. So it was piloted last year, but I guess
How were we made aware?
I remember it being spoken about in the presentation briefly, but not in depth. I do remember it being acknowledged.
May I jump in? My guess, and I don't know this off the top of my head, but through each month we went through the strategic plan updates, and so there are those bulleted points, and so it likely was in there as a
In
piece of
that.
communication, but again, not at any great level of detail. So
And the parents were not made aware until there was an alert and a report card or on a grading like F, and all of a sudden then it was backpedaled.
the 80/20.
The 80/20.
That, I believe that was communicated before the start of the school year, like at
In the
syllabus.
WOW,
Yes,
in the
in the
WOW.
WOW, yes.
In the syllabus it was this year.
Okay.
It was, as you're walking into your homeroom, it was sitting here saying, make sure you grab that piece of paper
Okay.
with about 6 other items or 6 other pages in that. It was not called about
Yeah.
directly
So
that way.
I'm feeling like the consensus is that we're a detailed group, the more the better. I feel like that's what I was hearing is people weren't as ready as likely you would want us to feel, and it felt surprising. That wasn't likely the intention, but now you know. But now you know, and so I feel like as any changes like this, the more the better. But I think in the pilot, what might have been experienced is it was a little different in each grade level. So we're going to talk about consistency tonight, and I'm curious like what the team has come together to make consistency be something that students could expect, if that's where we go. And then the other thing was just, and I heard this concern really spoken eloquently by Nicole as far as, how do we make sure that learners who aren't strong test takers in the moment aren't left behind? And I think I watched it and still wanted more kind of comfort and assurance of how that would take place. So that's how I experienced it. Those were my kind of two key questions as we talked today, and I'd love feedback on. That's for myself, so.
Also, I
Yeah.
believe you said that the high school is using this.
So they're moving in, from the conversations that I've had with their curriculum director, they are moving in the direction. Whether or not they formally are calling it that, a lot of the practices that they're putting in place follow the standards-based grading protocol, or procedures essentially, but they then take everything that's been separated out and then they convert it back to a single letter grade. So they're doing a lot of work to then undo that work when they then report it out to families.
So I did talk to John Gendron at Westosha about it, and he replied back to me on letterhead saying, Westosha Central does not use standard-based grading. We use the more traditional grading scale, ABCs. We continue to work with our staff on assessment and grading as it relates to learning. With that being said, we do not have any plans to adopt standard-based grading.
That's different than, the informal conversations. So, that's his formal response, and so, they're saying letter grades. There's a lot of little pieces that come into the teaching and learning part that can be standards-based. And so I don't know, somehow we have different messages, that we're getting different messages.
Right.
And so,
Right.
there's more communication that obviously I need to have with the high school and figuring out what that looks like. I do know that they have a balance of that 90% summative, 10% formative.
Yes, I did hear that also as well. So I did talk to the math teacher, and I was told that math does, sorry, I'm just trying to find the email. 10% homework, 40% per procedural, 40% application, 10% final assessment. 10% for homework is a completion grade. It is not graded on if it's correct. It's graded on if they attempted to do it. That's the math for the 90-10.
Okay.
I also talked to an administrator who has been at Stevenson High School in Illinois. He has been administrator there for 26 years. And he said it took them 10 years to fully implement standard grading. And he said, I'm looking for his last quote, he said to me, I would urge some serious groundwork first before implementing anything.
Yes, absolutely. I fully agree with that. Yes.
How do you plan on keeping all the teachers consistent?
So that's one of the questions that kind of came up at the last time that we discussed. And so the item that you have that has the word draft on it, it is draft, so it's something that we've been working together. I mentioned that I would be working with the middle school team as far as what consistency around reassessment looks like.
Is this all the teachers in middle school that would be working with this?
Well, this was the core content area teachers as well as special education teachers. So
Okay.
it did not include on-core or special area teachers in the conversation. However, my next step with this, once we get this finalized, is to then take it and have that conversation with those Encore teachers as well, to get them on the same page as well, because they still have that balance of that 80-20, so.
Okay.
Going from there. So the idea is that this would then be for all. And so this, we sat down at length, lots of teams had lots of different suggestions and ideas of how they handled the reassessment. Because it was a pilot year, there were a lot of differences that you did experience, and that is a side effect, unfortunately, of a pilot, which, we learned from it, and I think I heard a lot of great feedback from our families and from students, from teachers, to have this consistency was really important. So, so we did put this together through that conversation, and really clarifying what does reassessment look like. It's not just retaking a test, so we thought having that clarification of what does it actually mean to reassess. It's not just retaking a test, because it's so much more than that. And then we mapped out what those reassessment procedures are. And again, this is up for a conversation with the team. It's still in very much a work in progress, so please don't take this as this is the final end-all be-all, but this is where we ended up after that conversation last
Does these
week.
assessments somewhat pull the teacher away from a full class teaching?
Typically, and one of the reassessment procedures on here is that reassessment will likely occur outside of typical class time.
So the
during-
teacher's pulled out for that, to do individual reassessments?
So it depends, and I don't know if any of the teachers want to talk at how you handled reassessment. You guys would be a better, if it's okay for them to share.
In 7th grade, we did it during advisory time, or sometimes a student would come in during recess to reassess, but I wouldn't leave ELA class to assess one student, it would be during a separate time.
8th grade was the same, it would be during our advisory time. Did a lot of students, and this is new to me, so did a lot of students take advantage of coming back and re-going through and trying to master like a concept or an idea?
Yeah, so in 8th grade, at the end of an assessment, they do a reflection,
Okay.
and it's per standard. So then they would see which errors they made, and a lot of them noticed, oh wow, all my errors were in this one standard. Like, this is the piece that I'm missing. And that is something that standards-based grading gives you, that a B on a test wouldn't necessarily give you. So once they saw that, they knew exactly what they needed to work towards, and I had a lot of kids who would want to do a reassessment to make sure that they learned that one particular concept before we moved on to another unit.
How would you reteach that area if it's maybe 1 or 2 kids then?
Well, it's during advisory, so it's all, because we're in units, we have lots of things that we don't actually use within the unit. So I would go back to a previous text and teach that same skill, but within, just like in a small group. There's times in my classroom I pull a small flexible group, so it's the same thing as an advisory,
How long is advisory?
28 minutes.
Yeah, I don't know if during, it's, since we're in a workshop and kind of in this info gathering phase, everyone, if they'd like to share, I know some people don't enjoy the speaking portion, but, like, both wins and then things that were maybe obstacles during the pilot year, and then, I like stories of that, that helps us grasp, like, what it would look like in reality. So if anyone wanted to share.
Well, I think mine's like the same as Jill's, where students really can pinpoint exactly what they're struggling with. When you just give them a percentage, it's not very clear to them sometimes exactly what part of reading or writing they're struggling with. So that's definitely one of the benefits. And
Yeah.
same thing with parents. The parents can see, like if my daughter gets an 84% in ELA, I don't know what 16% she's struggling with, but if I can see that she's struggling with standard 1, then I know that that's what she needs to work on instead of some random 16% that I'm not aware of.
Was that communicated to the parents? Like the pros or the struggling aspects for any student? You said,
I guess, how would you,
yeah,
how would you?
how is
would
that
you-
communicated to the
So,
parents?
I would conference with parents, but I'm saying the difference is with their report card, it's very clear that you can see that with, like, you can just see that throughout the year, and you'd be able to see it in Skyward, like what standard they're struggling with, instead of like, and yes, you can
And
conference with the teacher, but it's something in real time that you can see.
So couldn't you just I mean, if it was letter grades, wouldn't it just be an added comment of like, hey, your student's struggling in such and such?
But I mean, with 100 students, I wouldn't be able to email every single day like what.
No, it would be just on the
exactly.
report
But yeah, I
card,
mean,
like you
you can, when
said.
you conference with parents, definitely you can talk about like what they're struggling with. And I'm saying like, if my daughter had standards-based grading, I could check each day and see what standard she was struggling with like that day, or when it's put in. So it's just, it's more relevant feedback in my opinion in real time.
So this sort of like, we got, and they provided like a sample view of report card, this would be available in Skyward.
So they don't have a copy of this, so
I thought I
this is
saw
something I
something.
literally put together in about 15 minutes, so, because you said, is there like a sample?
We did get this in 7th grade, and I did not bring the
Oh,
handout.
the
that
back
was
part
sent.
of, this part is,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, the front part.
Like what we would see.
Somewhere though, I did read, and forgive me because I've been reading a lot. It said somewhere that it would not be updated, that
Yes.
the grade book would be updated later than it wouldn't be on a regular basis.
You wouldn't be doing this daily, that'd be
So
crazy.
it's the rolling grade, right? So you have to have 3 events in it for there to be like an overall rating for the grade, but you would still be able to see the single events there.
Yes,
Put in.
so, so each assignment is basically your assessment is called an event. And in order for the system to, it uses what's called trend grading. So it takes and it says, okay, you've done 3 assignments and you've done X, Y, and Z on them. So overall, the trend is that you're on track meeting. So it takes 3 events or 3 assignments essentially for that grade to populate. So it just depends on how long those 3 assessments get into the system.
So if the high school that the kids are going to does not use this system, how does that information extrapolate into their grading system? I mean, you
How
see,
did they
For
get the
their
information?
GPA.
well,
doesn't go
it
into
doesn't go
GPA.
into GPA, correct?
Everything
No.
I've read, it doesn't go into.
And
GPA.
the high school that most of these kids are going to does not use this system, standard-based grading. So how do they, going into high school, get measured for their brilliance?
Yes,
You can do it.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah.
because I do actually have some thoughts on that, because my
Okay.
role is a little different, and I tend to obviously look at kids, I look at kids here, 4K through 8th, and then you look at high school as well. First off, we
Just
have,
can
I'm
name-
sorry,
can
Kathleen
you-
Dovich, reading specialist.
Right.
So
For
we
everybody.
do have those larger summative assessments that the high school does use. So we have math, we have forward, we have those larger summative assessments. So very easily, we can, the high school can look at those as far as, AP and honor class placement. They have teacher recommendations for those sort of placements. What would be an appropriate placement as far as that goes? I think we need to be really careful. I know we're a K-8 school. Just like we need to be careful to not look at our middle schoolers like primary kids. I completely understand. I have my own children, they've gone through Bristol School and through Central High School. But I think we need to be careful to not look at our middle schoolers like high schoolers. They're very, very different. They're still, developing, and I get it. I know we want that consistency, but they are still developing.
That actually, which is what was communicated to us as we're preparing them for high school. Why we're doing this is because we're preparing them for high school. But if high school's not doing what we're preparing them for, these kids are already in the hardest time of their life. 6th to 8th grade is the hardest time of their life. Their bodies are changing, their kids are changing, attitudes are coming out. They're already going from being a little kid to now expected to do this, then to go into, and now every single year, we're throwing a curveball to these kids. It's not fair. Their anxiety and their depression, and now we're gonna put this on them more, should not be.
And this is just my opinion. I honestly think this is kind of less stressful because it's just a simple, oh, I'm doing really well here. Oh, I'm not so great here, I need some work here. And it's non-judgmental. It's, I'm good here, oh, I need to work a little more here, and then we're filling those gaps while the developmental window is still really, really wide open. Versus as you get older, it's harder to kind of fill those gaps. It makes more sense, just to me, my professional opinion, to fill those, any little gap now, and then when they get to the high school, and the stakes, let's face it, the stakes are higher. You're talking scholarships. You are talking much higher stakes when you get there. The GPA counts when you get to high school.
Right.
The GPA doesn't count.
For sure.
It doesn't. So that's just kind of my opinion.
Yeah, if I could say, so with the preparing for high school thing, you're talking about the reporting versus the learning. We are preparing them for high school and their learning, not the reporting of that learning. So that's what you're talking about is the reporting. So why we're trying to switch to standards-based is because, like Kathleen said, they're able to see where their gaps are, and then we can start to fill those gaps before they go to high school. I have to say, I talked about grading today with standards-based with all my 8th graders. They were so excited about this way of grading as opposed to getting a grade. And when I asked them, what does it mean when you get a B? And they said, well, it means I'm doing okay. And I said, and how do you get that A? And none of them could answer. And I said, is the answer that I give you an assignment that's easy enough for you to get 100 on and that's what pushes you to an A? And they all said, yep, exactly. So they are not taking part in their learning with us if they don't know what specific skills they need to work on, and just seeing a B in the grade book or a C in the grade book isn't enough information for them.
And I think too, I'm gonna add to that with, like, the reassessment process. We, in years past, have said, all right, you're gonna do a retake, and it's the whole thing. I've been able to start saying, okay, here's our standards. My kids did not do well in this standard. One, as a teacher, I could say, ooh, we're all, you know, having trouble here. As a teacher, I can change tracks and like modify what I'm teaching the next day or the next couple of days. But also the kids, when we were talking about the process for the 3 R's, the retake, reflection, and remediation, it's, I'm not gonna make you redo the whole thing again, because you showed me you can do these skills. And I said, but these skills might need some work, so let's do, you know, I'm gonna reassess you on these skills. And I had so many more kids that were like, wait, we don't have to redo the whole thing, and they were so much more, I don't wanna say excited, it's day 2, but yeah, receptive to saying, oh, I might actually partake in these reassessments and the little bit of work that I have to do, meet with the teacher and, you know, because. they
So
only
you're
have to-
doing that in math already this year?
Well, we started a little bit last year, but that's just something, I mean, we haven't gotten into our curriculum just yet.
Sure.
But that's something that, yes, we will look at, here's an assessment, we did this quiz, if you will. All right, you got, you know, 4s on these questions, but this was a 2, let's look at it. And then when we reassess, all right, did you show me that, yeah, we did some relearning, reteaching, and now you know that skill? Yep, all right, you get your points, and it's,
So can't you do that, but then still keep the traditional grade scale? I mean, can't you like adjust that in your own classroom without changing it throughout?
So, yes, you absolutely can, and that is what the pilot did in ELA last year. And so I think that comes to that question of just thinking about what is the purpose of grading. And, you know, I would say a huge purpose of grading is to communicate students' progress. And does that single letter grade clearly enough communicate that progress? The goal with switching over to having it broken down into the different standards, as this example shows, is that then you're like, okay, these are the specific areas, and it more clearly articulates to families and to students about what that progress looks like. So to answer your question in short, I already said, yes, you could. I kind of feel like it's a disservice to do all of this work and then just to then kind of repackage it up with this generalized letter grade. The other tricky part with that too is that the conversion is a kind of complex process of taking it from that like standards-based level, and then because you're going from a 4-point scale to a 100-point scale, and they look a little bit different.
Speaking of the conversion, how will this be converted when, you know, if their kids are not doing so well in class and they can't do sports?
So that's a great question. That was something that we discussed when we were talking about the reassessment piece of it, and as a team, we felt that really talking about the work habits that the students had were very important as well. And one of the primary reasons that a lot of times students aren't successful with their learning is in part their work habits. And so at the bottom, we added, and this is also added into the ELA grade book, is the on-time work completion, collaboration, reflection, and independent reading. And then rather than having the 4-level scale, it's just you're getting it or you're not. This is an area of concern, or you're doing just fine. Just to kind of indicate to students and parents, like, hey, I've been in this particular situation. Trimester 1, trimester 2, they're doing great. Oh man, something's happened in trimester 3. You got a lot of stuff going on, and you're not turning your work in on time, and now you see that there's this decline. And so what we talked about with like the participation in sports is really looking at these work habits and determining what that looks like, and okay, if they're not turning their work in on time, is that the reason that they wouldn't be engaging in sports?
But there wouldn't be any homework, right?
So there's homework too. There's classwork.
Or it's practice?
There's practice, yes.
Instead of the word homework?
Yes, because
So
practice
that's not required to be turned in?
It would still. So the expectation is that it still is turned in.
Okay.
Absolutely. So students should still be turning it in. There is a way for us to track that in Skyward as well. I think we had talked about having it separately, but there's some ways to have that tracked too, so that parents can stay on top of that to make sure, oh yes, you are definitely completing your work. But it wouldn't be factored into that final grade. It's more so just tracking those work habits.
Okay.
So I just want to respond. The board didn't say we want the kids to be in the same grading system so they can slide into the high school. You actually presented it that way. The high school is using this and that prepares them to get into it. So I think we're kind of backwards. And like I said, I've heard this can be an amazing system, but we were cautioned by everybody that yes, go very slow, don't do this fast. And the fact that we had a major grading change a year ago and our school report card shows a decline, a pretty good sized decline, which is alarming. My personal opinion is you need to give kids consistency and time to measure these big changes, and this is too soon to do this one.
I'm sorry,
My opinion.
I'm sorry, can I, clarification, what declined, what declined?
Oh, can I share this? So according to DPI,
Can I see one too?
Yeah.
Another copy?
yeah,
Well,
according to DPI, our performance has gone down consistently the last couple of years. And as you know, I wasn't here for that. But I've heard we've had a lot of change, and you can kind of see how that happens. It's, I think, with children of any age, you need consistency, right? I would imagine everyone would agree with that. Our overall score in 21-22 is 80.7, and then it went down to 80.3, and now it's at 77.8.
I'm sorry, where are you seeing, because I only see
Oh,
the
yeah.
start to 22, 23.
I printed off of DPI,
Okay.
and then that was converted for easier viewing, this graph.
Mrs. Yusuf, can you speak to that a little bit as far as I know the MAP scores? the
Well, these
forward
are right
test-
off DPI.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
But forward testing, I know last year, as we reviewed it, again, we saw those kids on the lower scale that were making a nice improvement, which was, I think, a lot of our concerns, which was fantastic. Overall, the overall number did, I think, decline somewhat, but then, you know, when I looked at the other, however many schools there are, 8 schools west of
You
the
guys
I,
wanna see
I
this?
think the west of the I schools, I think there were only 1 or 2 schools that improved. So everybody else, and then we declined less than I believe all the other schools that did decline. And I believe there was a 3 or 4 year average that precipitated some of that decline because of the COVID year and so forth. And we spoke to all that.
Yes.
And we all came out of that meeting honestly feeling great as to what was accomplished by the teachers at Bristol School. So just looking at the numbers, I think, and I don't know if you can speak to more, you spoke to it very eloquently months
You
ago.
kinda
and-
summed it up
And I
very
wish, I
well
wish
yourself.
everybody would have been at that meeting, because I think you would have heard that and
Well,
seen that
I
the
mean, I'm
numbers-
looking at DPI, and,
No,
and this
I
is
I
what
understand that.
they have printed out. And I'm not saying Bristol is a bad school, that's not where I'm going. I'm saying, when you make big changes,
It just looks
you
like
have
it's
to
dry.
have a period of time to measure how that works and integrate that. And a big
Before you change it again.
A big change a year ago and a big change this year, I think is really hard on families and students. And I feel like we shouldn't be doing that.
I mean, I think if, you know, I'm concerned in that the expertise at this school as far as curriculum and grading is with principal and teachers. And, you know, I guess I can see the board, you know, and I see, you know, Richmond, Virginia with, you know, getting on an uproar about this, and, you know, wherever else, getting, you know, school boards getting an uproar about major changes being made in schools. And if we were going to a pass-fail system, or if we were going to a no grading system completely, or whatever we might have been doing, then I can see the board taking a bigger role. In this case, it's hard for me to agree that there was a big change last year. I mean, we changed from a grading system that did give credit for homework more than it did last year. I believe at the last meeting, though, Mrs. Houston said that the overall grades basically stayed the same from the year previous to last year. So that change didn't impact the overall student body. And I think it was, in my opinion, a fairly minor change. I mean, this is, again, a fairly minor change, tweaking something. And again, this has been, you know, for those of us that sat in on the committee with the strategic plan, you know, this is what we wanted to accomplish through the strategic plan. We wanted to, one of the big goals was to improve student achievement. And we've made steps to do that, especially with the kids that were at the lower end of the scale. And you know, I don't know how this is going to impact my kid. I mean, my kid on the old scale, I'm not going to get into all that. It's just my kid. I think, you know, I'd be shocked if there's any teacher in middle school right now at Bristol School that would say this is not going to benefit these students short-term and long-term. I would be shocked.
I've heard it.
I've heard it
Who-
both
who-
ways, and I
who
said,
said
this
that?
can be, that was Tina. I've heard it both ways. I mean, Stevenson loves it, but they paralleled. They did double work for 10 years
Before it was
before
implemented.
they implemented it.
So I look at this as an opportunity though, right now. So we're hear what you're saying, and so if we even look at this year as an even stronger pilot than last year, this is the process. Like, we're currently in year 2 of like the 10-year window, and we're doing it in one particular subject.
I think there's too many unanswered questions.
Yeah,
Well,
How are
that's-
we gonna do this? Oh, we're not really sure yet. How are we gonna do this?
We've
Well,
discussed-
we
I
talked
think
about this,
that's-
but this may not be, I think there's too many unanswered.
I think that's,
Which is totally gonna involve into not being consistent in the classroom.
so that's a conversation I feel like we're trying to have now. Like, for the thing about sports, to me, I hear her concerned about sports, and I say, hey, can we say with ELA, as a constructive thing, with ELA, let's not at all link that to sports. For this year, we're
We
still
should, 'cause it's
piloting.
a main
But outside
main
sports,
subject.
they require the ELA. They
a main
require the
subject.
core
Right.
subjects.
So we could, as a pilot compromise, you can say, we're gonna make sure that that isn't held against an athlete while we're doing it this year. Or, but we haven't even talked yet about the work being, like, what can we do with practice and how can that, continue to be something that for if a student needs that extra practice, can that effort be included in that process? Because I'm not sure how that would look. I feel like we are having the conversation, and to keep saying, oh, it hasn't been communicated or we're moving too fast, like, let's then slow down and have the conversation.
It's already
But
started
you've
though.
already started.
It's already started.
And it was presented, as you could hear, as what the high school's using.
She said, hold on, because you've said that 3 times now.
Yeah,
I
that's what
watched
she
it. I
said.
watched it again today. She said, quote, they're moving towards it, they haven't started yet. So let's just be fair. She probably would redo it now, but she didn't say categorically they're using it across the board at Central. So that's unfair.
Okay. And then I believe she also referenced a policy that I should get familiar with, right? 5421.
Yes,
So
yes.
I feel like you came into that a week before school with what I consider a large change. And I could be wrong, but I could swear you said the high school's going to this, and maybe, I'll give you that, maybe she said they're working towards it. Then you gave me this policy, as though my feeling was that you presented this like the board has to deal with it and you have no choice. And what I found is there's actually a policy in place, 5421A, that says the board must make final approval for any of these types of changes. So the fact that it's already been instituted, I'm all for a discussion. But even you, as you're describing, you're saying we could or. Those ors shouldn't be in there. I think to be fair to the students, if we're doing it, we should already know exactly
Where we're
right?
going.
Where we're going. My concern is that there's a lot of, it seems like reassessment. How many times are you gonna test the kids instead of teaching them?
So that actually is a conversation that we had at length when we met last week about what that looks like, and you guys expressed that actually nobody reassessed more than one time on a particular assessment. Was that?
Well, that is correct. And we also.
So
we
it's
are-
an assessment per try?
No, not necessarily, but we're also doing the reteaching, reassessing during advisory, which is separate from our class. It takes no time away from my teaching.
What are the kids supposed to be doing?
They're gonna have to relearn, or not relearn, but still learn the stuff that they're dragging behind. So where does that come into play?
Well, in ELA, we're constantly teaching the standards over and over again throughout the year. So we don't just teach it once, assess it, and then never address that standard again. It's constantly taught throughout the school year.
They're kind of like the 5 main things that they need to know before they leave our class. So for example, we have citing text evidence, analyzing a text. Every 8th grader should be able to do that before they go to high school. We don't just assess that one time. It is with every text that we teach, we're doing it again and again and again. So truthfully, with standards-based grading, they wouldn't even need to take reassessment because they're just gonna take the next assessment and show that they've mastered it.
Okay,
That's
but
really the
how
goal,
often is
not
the
that we need to
assessment?
keep reassessing. We reassess because parents want to reassess.
How often are you reassessing?
After the assessment, but it's not taking any time away from my ELA teaching. That is totally different. It's during the advisory class. Like if you did poorly on an assessment, you wanted to reassess, you would come see me during advisory. We would reteach the material with a different text, and then you would take the reassessment. So it's not at all taking away anything from my regular ELA class.
I understand that, so, but I still don't understand how many times in one trimester are you reassessing?
As many times as the kid needs to retake their test. So it could be every single test.
Is
So
it
it could
a
be
test,
every
or is it like, and that's not like they could be a written
It
exam.
is a
But it
test.
could take a variety of formats?
It can be, yes.
Yeah, and if you look at the definition on the draft document, so reassessment does not simply mean retaking a test. Reassessment can include completing an assessment, either whole or partial, that has the same content but different prompts. So that could be just, switching the questions up, but just getting to the same thing. It could mean that they're correcting a part of the original assessment and reflecting on changes, and it could mean that they're doing some kind of alternative assessment. So it's not just that completion of that whole whole test because it's broken down into those standards. The other piece of this, and I think that I guess maybe it's a question or reflection, is that a lot of what we're doing, it's more, at least in the classroom level, is more around standards-based teaching and learning. And that regardless of whether or not how we report grades happen, that part of instruction, I don't see changing, right? Because our teachers should be teaching the standards, they should be reassessing, they should be monitoring progress on that. So really, it's a difference of how these things are being reported out. So I mean, even without the reporting piece of it in there, I would still see the reteaching, the reassessing, the student reflection on that happening. And so I think it's just, I want to clarify that we're talking, I think the concern right now is more so with how the reporting is and not necessarily on the instructional practices. But those are kind of two separate things.
Yeah, I don't see how the reassessment could ever be a bad thing. Aren't we trying, I mean, these are kids that are getting, kind of freaked out because they got their first C when they're used to getting A's, or they got their first F when they're used to getting B's, or whatever the case might be. I mean, these kids want to be reassessed because that grade is important to them on the report card the next time they see it on Skyward. And so I guess I don't get the concern with the reassessment. As Ms. Houston said, I think reassessment is going to continue to happen, I would think, if we're in the best interest of the kids, because we're trying to help them out through the reassessment. I mean, and this whole program ties back to that. I mean, it ties back to individualized learning and teaching, and these kids should, learn more through this process as opposed to just getting a grade. At least that's how I understand it. I've read it. I think, what you put out to the middle school. I hope everybody got to read what. Did you get to read this, Nicole?
Oh, yeah.
That went to 7th grade, you got to read this? So, I mean, you read through this, I just don't see any negatives, I guess. And again, I don't see this big flip-flop change. I mean, this is a progression that's happened over the years, starting with the strategic plan and going into last year with the piloting program and so forth. So I guess I'm concerned about the inquisition. I'm quite concerned about the teachers and the principal coming out of this with kind of a no confidence vote, which I hope they don't. And I don't know if you all mean it that way. I mean, I know if I was sitting in the chairs, that's probably how I would take it.
I don't think
I don't think it's no confidence.
anyone in this
Good.
room wants anything but the best education for these kids here.
Right.
Absolutely.
What I'm saying is I feel like it was thrown at us with a too bad, so sad, and no time to look into it. As we looked into it, it can be tremendous, but you can't just jump into it. And so I asked, how long have you been doing this? Why did we not know anything about it? Again, I stand on the same ground. I feel like on the heels of changing and I believe you said, and you feel free to correct me, I did not watch the video. We don't give grades for homework because most of the parents are doing the homework.
I did not say most.
I don't think it's that much.
No, I did not say
Okay.
most. But we don't give grades for homework because in some cases that parents do it, or they're working with friends or something like that.
Or AI does it.
Or AI does it.
Well, it could be.
Well, then how are
And-
the kids, how can they not participate in Fun Friday when their homework's not turned in?
Fun Friday.
We don't do Fun Fridays. That was a 6th grade
That was a
incentive.
Okay.
But they were penalized for not having their homework turned in.
I can't speak to
Okay,
what
yeah, I
strict
understand.
policy was.
So
on
my
Fun Friday.
opinion is that it's just too soon to do this, to adopt it. I think it needs a lot more time to evaluate the change that was made last year. That's all. And I'm not trying to say I have no confidence in any of the teachers here. I don't think anybody would be here if you didn't care about the kids.
Joanne, you mentioned kind of like that 10-year process.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of mapping out, so really, like, we started this work with the book study in 22, 23, I was just trying to map it out, and so looking at last year's the pilot, this year ELA, then we'd be looking at basically like one content area per year. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's at like 6 years of implementation.
That's,
So, I mean,
yeah.
it is definitely a faster timeline than Stevenson. I believe Stevenson High School did this process probably about 20 years ago.
But they ran in parallel, which I understand is a lot more work for the teachers, but the students still got their grade that helped, you know, their GPA. And they ran them parallel so that they could develop a way to convert it to the GPA, which is what colleges want.
Well,
We don't calculate GPA?
I know we
Okay,
don't.
okay.
But if this is to get them used to a program that then they would go to, even if Central was using it. And if they're looking at it, they're probably looking at the same thing. It takes years and years to measure everything before you make a change. I do know sometimes schools make changes, and sometimes it's great, and sometimes it's not. And the kids that were in there with those change where it's not, they can never catch up. So, I mean, I'm only one person, that's my opinion. I'm not saying anybody is doing anything wrong, other than I think it's too soon.
I'm curious if we can find pieces that would help, like, you know, ideally, we're unified always in a moving forward in a plan, but are there pieces that could be in place that would help you feel more confident that this is year 2 and we're gonna continue to look at how it works?
If this was level or going up, then yes, but it's not. And so, I feel like
I wish
we
you
need-
would have been at the school board meeting when that was discussed.
well, I'm here now and I'm looking at the facts that
Yeah.
DPI is recording, and I don't wanna
But you're
argue
looking-
with
And I
you.
had the-
looking at
and I had the
aggregate-
I'm
exact
not
same
saying
concern.
that it's bad, and I'm entitled to my opinion. I did the research.
What,
And-
may I ask?
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but what was the last year that you have on there? Is that the
22, 23.
22, 23.
So
And
that
it
was
went-
where we
Because-
did not implement standard-based grading. 22, 23 was
Yeah,
not
those-
a year of implementation.
DPI is always a year behind.
Correct. So we can't necessarily, at this point, I mean, a direct cause and effect, you know, connection, I don't think we can even ever make to that. However, the last year of reporting, you said that we implemented it and we went down.
No, I don't know that what you implemented because I wasn't here. That's what I said.
Right. Okay, yeah,
But I
I'm just saying,
think
it's not the current,
that
it's not last year's
Well,
data.
you said you started 21, 22, so what
They
was
read it.
started because that's
They
on
read a
here.
book. They read the book in 21, 22 and had
okay.
group discussions. They didn't do anything in a classroom
Okay.
until last year, and it's not reflected. I don't, graphs are too quick for me, but if what I'm hearing is
Oh.
last year's data is not on here, then it wouldn't have added
Last year isn't out yet.
Right, so,
Correct.
so the only thing we did in a classroom with standards-based grading was the pilot last year, and it's not reflected in the data. So if anything, we say we're seeing a trend that we don't like, we should be looking at individualized ways to improve, so.
Correct. And they made a way.
But we keep changing it
A
and
change
changing
in the
it and
grading
changing it and
structure
changing it.
just a year ago, and we have no measurement of how
What it did.
how that's working. And so by making another change, there's still no, then how do you know what was good? If your child has an allergy and you pull out, you know, different foods from their diet, unless you do it one at a time, how can you measure it? That's my point.
And I'm struggling because this is where it's really hard because this transition does take several years. How can you really measure the impact year by year if you're not fully implementing until after the 10th year?
Right, so I'm saying the grading change that you guys instituted last year should be followed through until there's some way to measure it.
With consistency.
Okay.
So is the only change if you can recap for me, what is the change? I mean, one, I'm seeing more consistent messaging across sixth, seventh, and eighth, and
Absolutely.
better things in writing, important.
Yes.
What is the difference that's specifically between last year and this year? Last year, you pushed it back into a traditional letter grade, right?
Correct.
And then this year, what is the only marked difference other than that?
Rather than bringing in a single letter grade, it breaks it down into an ELA into the 5 standards, and just gives a descriptive level of where the student is at with regard to that standard.
So is the thing that would make you feel more comfortable, and I don't, and I understand it's pushing it back, and there's like, the question is do you also publish that? Do you publish for the student a letter grade, or would you like to see data around corresponding letter grades? Because that's an interesting way also too to track change, would be to keep that internal. Was that even possible? But then you're knowing kind of where the cohort moves along?
That's what I'm telling you Stevenson did.
Yeah.
They ran both parallel.
I can see why they would have to, because GPA really truly matters in the high school format. I think it's a luxury that we don't have to have students be stressing about a 3.9.
For sure.
So I think,
But now, if our kids, let's say the 7th graders, obviously next year you wanna do this with math, so that's math and ELA. So does that mean going into high school, they potentially have to take 2 placement tests for math and ELA because they don't convert to letter grades?
We don't.
So now it's more testing for them and frustrating for the high school?
So.
No,
Okay, I was gonna say,
classes are based on teacher recommendation.
Yeah.
I recommend every kid to go into honors English or regular English. Mrs. Hubble recommends every kid based on our information as a teacher, which math class they go into. There's no test that they have to take
Okay.
to get into those classes. The only one is, I think, the highest level, geometry maybe, like up at that level, they have to, like those really advanced math students have to take another placement, but we do not.
There's
They
no
don't-
placement
No matter
test.
if it's letter grade or standards based.
Yeah, those students would, those
They would
math
have to take it no
those
matter what.
students,
Yeah, because they're trying to be advanced and get credits at the high school already.
So I'm just trying to understand, so the concern is that last year, we went to a grading system that the assessments counted more than they did previous year versus homework. So last year, we went to a grading system where homework only counted 20%. And the previous year, it counted, I think it was
That-
different.
There was
different- it
an
was
array
different.
of inconsistency,
Right.
we'll just say that.
Right. So that was the biggest change last year. And
Are you trying to convince
No,
me?
no,
I
no,
told
no.
you my point.
No, you're-
Okay, but you're looking at me,
No,
so.
Well, I'm looking at all 3 of you, I guess.
well, I think, yeah.
So, and the board in general, I mean, so the concern is that the students in that their homework wasn't counted as much, that they didn't learn as much, the student achievement potentially wasn't as strong as it was the previous
I
year?
think it was unnecessary stress, unnecessary anxiety, unnecessary
Okay.
trying to do it on another test, another time test, another test, another test, another test. It was,
So were there more tests last year? Or more
Depending upon the
assessments and
subject.
tests than there were previously?
So, and if I can respond
Sure.
to that again, moving to this system of standards-based grading actually eliminates all of that, because you have a student working for a grade, and when they're like, oh, I'm only at a C, and I know I want a B, or my mom wants me to have an A, I'm going to keep taking that assessment until I get that particular score. Whereas we really want them learning, and I'm sure you want them learning. So with the standards-based grading, it's going to eliminate a lot of that reassessment, because they're not aiming for that one particular letter. They're just focusing on being on track, being proficient, and making sure that they're growing as learners.
And if I could just add to that, students really get excited when they can really see their growth in a particular area. Especially, with what I do, we're very much looking at particular skills, especially even primary, and kids get super excited. They're like, oh, look, I can do this now. And when they can see that growth, they really get excited and they really feel really good about themselves. And it's that progression of skills. And then that progression of skills builds to larger skills, and you build upon those skills. And what you don't want is to build a house on quicksand. And that's the whole point of having these skills listed out, so that you're not missing those foundational skills.
Why
And that
can't
you
that,
know
so that
everything's
hasn't been
built.
done before though? I mean,
I think there's a greater likelihood, in all honesty. So a child gets an 85. Okay, that's a pretty good grade, right? That's a B. Okay, but what does that actually mean? In this case, let's say a child gets an 85 on an assessment. And let's say you were actually able to sit down and look at that assessment. If you knew what each one of those questions, those skills were targeting, you'd be able to say, oh, this is the skill, this is the skill, this is the skill. Rather than going through a 4-page assessment or whatever it might be, you can look on, the Skyward or the report card, and in real time, you can see the skills listed. Oh, they're struggling with this skill, they're struggling with this skill. And what that does is it allows the teachers to be able to help those students or help you in real time fill in those skills, so that all the students are building those foundational skills on really solid ground. And then everything is being built solidly, and so there's no cracks in those foundations.
And it was always done that way, like we were always teaching that way, it just wasn't reported that way.
Exactly.
So you as a parent, you would see, oh, ELA grade popped up, my kid got an 80. Well, you don't know exactly what I'm assessing, right? You just see a title and you see an 80. And so, there's a lot of parents in education, like I could look at my kid's work and see, oh, this was the teacher's trying to get you to do. A lot of parents can't do that, especially think of 8th grade math. A lot of parents are like, I'm done, I cannot be helping you with 8th grade math. So they can't see what this skill is. So in the past, our best reporting for parents was that MAP report. And the MAP report for ELA only broke it down to literary, nonfiction, and vocab. So that was like the best thing I could give you as a parent is, hey, your kid's lowest score is in vocabulary. So we're gonna work on that. Or your kid is really strong in nonfiction reading, but not the literary reading. So we're gonna focus more on that. So now we have this better way of reporting because we did the work of creating the essential standards and knowing that that's gonna be our focus for each grade and what we want our students learning before they leave that grade.
So how are you helping the kids that are gonna be constantly pulled out to get reassessed during their advisory, recess, or lunch?
So
Like if there you have kids that are struggling and they're constantly being reassessed and reassessed and reassessed, you're pulling them out of,
Okay, I feel like you're
Recess
harping on this
and lunch.
reassessment. Like we said, we never had a student reassess more than one time on this.
I'm
So I don't.
last year my own daughter was pulled out several times, and that's all I heard was complaints of, Mom, I had to sit out and I couldn't do recess because Mom, so-and-so pulled me out because I had to sit for so yes, it does come back to the parents that they're being pulled out. And they're being taken away from their own freedom of having their recess and having that break away from the class for a few minutes.
Okay, I have never kept a kid from recess.
So
I
like,
have-
she was, can I jump
Yeah.
in for a second? Your daughter was in 6th grade last year? Okay, so we don't have a 6th grade teacher here to discuss that, so I think that's a specific situation. But I do think, what I wanna say is that those kinds of concerns we heard last year, that those inconsistencies were there. And that's one of the pieces that when we got together as a middle school team, we really felt it was important to have that level of consistency, because when someone's getting pulled or, how they're being pulled or
You
being
even
penalized.
have it on
for-
here that's when they'll be pulled out. Advisory, recess, and lunch, or after school.
So it doesn't say that it is when, it says it may.
Right, that's an option. So
That's giving the
especially
option to
in
the
math, there
kids.
were a lot of students who would want to do it during recess time because they feel that pressure of like, I just want this over with. I would rather give up my recess today and do that reassessment than go out to recess. Like I said, I have never had a kid stay in from recess to do a reassessment. And I know only in math, in 8th grade, did that ever happen, and it was always voluntary by the student. So if that happened in 6th grade, I'm sorry, it's not happening in 7th and 8th grade.
In 7th grade, we only had kids during advisory.
And
so.
underneath the reassessment procedures, and I think this potentially may address that concern. 1, 2, 3, 4. The fifth bullet
Let's
point.
give this no more than.
Go ahead.
Reassessment's not automatic. So in the case of your daughter, it sounded like she kept being forced to reassess. I do wonder if that was maybe something that was like an automatic thing, which in this procedure that we're laying out, that it's not going to be an automatic thing. Students would be required to request it, so they wouldn't be forced then to miss out on things.
Actually, I think it says in the new handbook that we had to sign off on for registration, it was, you probably didn't read it, I didn't read it until after the fact, but it was grades 4 through 8, we expect the kids to advocate for themselves instead of the parents advocating for them. And then K through 8, they expect their parents can advocate. I think that's what the new handbook says.
Yes, I believe that was in there last year as well.
Did you have something to add?
So, my name is Lisa. I'm a parent. I have actually an 8th grader and a 5th grader, and I'm also a 2nd grade teacher here at the school. And standards-based reporting is something that we do in primary. I don't even know if I went back to 5th grade, I don't know how I could give a 76% again. And the reason why that is because you don't know by a 76% what the kid understands and what the kid doesn't understand. And I don't know, because primary and middle school were very separate entities, so I don't know the work that has gone into the standards-based grading, but it is a lot of work. And when we look as like a 2nd grade team, we have our standards for our assessments in both literacy and mathematics. We don't have that so much in science and social studies, but it's something that, one day we hope to get to. No rush though, please. And when we sit and we look at the assessments, we have the standards, and per question on the assessments, we can identify where our kids are overall. And so then when we look at like, let's say telling time to the that's simple, 2nd grade. We can see all of our students across 2nd grade of the students that have the skill and they don't. And so when I look at that assessment and that student doesn't have, that they can't tell time, I say to myself, they have to learn how to tell time. So during my instructional time, I pull those students again and again, and I practice with them and I teach them. And we do that in mathematics, and we also do that in literacy with reading and coding and diagraphs and things. I think the concern maybe is that we want to make sure all of our I's and T's are crossed, because it is scary and it is a lot of work. I've worked with Jill for 9 years. We worked more closely in 5th and 6th grade. And I think I'm a really good teacher. Jill is a great teacher as far as looking at data, and I'm hoping my 8th grader learns a lot from Mrs. McDonald, but me as a parent, when I see a 76%, I don't know what that means. And because I have that teacher-parent mind, I'll say to my kids, where's the rubric? Like, why did you get this, D? And I go through and I want that information.
Yeah.
And if our teachers are dotting the T's and crossing their I's, and we're making sure that these kids have rubrics, and they're conferencing with their teachers, and they're making sure that those skills are being done, I want that. I want that for my kid. If I'm doing that in 2nd grade for other people's children, I want that for my middle school kids. And I know it's hard because we see A's, B's, and C's. I have a daughter, I'm sorry, I know it's being, it's hard being online, but she struggles. And she's in 5th grade. So, and I want to know where she struggles. I can read, and she doesn't want me to work with her because she's like, you're just being my teacher now, and I have to put that parent hat on. But I would love to look through and know exactly what my daughter knows and what she doesn't know, so that I can help her. Homework, if skills are being brought, I don't want to do the homework. Practice is practice. Like my 2nd graders, they're doing the work in the classroom with me as I'm fostering their learning, and they are doing it with me. I think that's how, I don't know, I will know after this year. So if I'm sticking my neck out for you right now, so come June, you better have my kid. That's what I feel as like a parent and as a teacher. But I understand that, like, when things are so much in question and you don't know, and I'm gonna agree, I didn't know as a parent that this is what we were going, I didn't even know it was being piloted last year, and my son was in 7th grade. That information was never given to me. And, so as sitting on that side of things, I would have some reservations and wonderings too. But I'm hoping, looking at someone, if Jill was leading that pack of making sure in ELA, everything was crossed and T's, and then I would trust that. I'm like whispering to Jill, is it something that maybe 8th grade does pilot? Maybe it's a pilot when you guys are talking, I don't know. But, I see both sides with that, but I also see myself as a teacher and what I do down in primary. And when I have a conference with a parent, I know exactly what their kid does and what they don't do. And my job as that teacher is to make sure that if I see not meeting a standard, I'm not gonna give that paper to you as the parent and say, you better work on that work with your kid because they don't have that standard. I look at it as my team, whether it's Mrs. Dopich or Mrs. Golm or myself or my teammates, what are we going to do? Because this kid isn't getting it, right? And that's the end goal. So it's, what are we doing? And we use grading to what they're learning, but it's something more instructional, like, and that's where it is. And you can go online, I can pull up my Bridges mathematics, all of my literacy, line by line. I know every student, and if they can start doing that in middle school, and dot their T's, because we're T's crossed and everything else with the kids. I think that's what's best for kids in the end. But that's just my 2 cents. But I understand.
Thank you for sharing.
I wanted to share that.
It's, well, you all know my opinion. I said it 3 times. I just feel like, we owe 100% knowing how this works and consistency and no ors, maybes, or we're not sure yet before we adopt this.
I guess just to make that point again, I don't hear those things. I hear that they've worked on it for a long time period now, and I think they have all their ducks in a row for this year. I think last year there were some inconsistencies.
How can they have their ducks in a row when it's drafted?
Well, that's for the reassessment piece. And
But
again,
the school started.
last year there were reassessment concerns. I understand that.
School's already started.
Okay, but she has the draft to put into place. And I just, personally, I wish that we would have gone to this 4 or 5 years ago, because I know 2 students in particular very well that, and I don't know if this comes into play or not, but last year, when they looked at Skyward, they knew the very last test, what they had to get an A. In this class, they only needed an 86%. In this class, they needed a 92%. In this class, they only needed a 75% because they already had, they were already here and they could figure it out, and they could figure out the assessments. And I didn't know as a parent what they were learning or what they weren't learning. All I knew was that these 2 particular students, they knew that they needed this particular grade to get an A, and they were going to get that A. Now, did they learn as much as they should have over that last 20 days of class? I hope they did. I hope they did. But at the same time, I love the fact that they're actually getting feedback on what they're learning, and that the parents are getting that as well, and that I'm not just seeing the grade. I guess I see that as the whole point of this whole change, and I just don't see it as a big change. I see it as very incremental. I wish that everybody in this room would have been at every single meeting. I wish they would have been at the strategic plan meetings. When we first started the strategic plan, I wish they would have been at every meeting when Mr. Musha updated the strategic plan. It wouldn't be a surprise, even speaking to what Lisa said, it wouldn't be a surprise,
Well, it
because
shouldn't have been a
we've known all
surprise.
along we were working this direction. We're
Yeah.
moving in this direction.
Well,
We didn't know
okay.
these
Well, I
actual
think
specifics,
everybody
but we
shared
knew
their
that we're moving
opinions.
this direction.
Can I say one
And
more
we are already at 5:45.
Can I
too.
just say one more thing?
Sure.
I know you're concerned with the quickness of the rollout or not having everything ready on day one. When I get a curriculum, I'm not ready on day one. So every single time in education, there's so much we are handed and we figure it out as we're going. They say with the curriculum, because we talk about measurement, it takes 3 years with the curriculum before you
Right.
can finally measure and figure out, and it's true, I feel it, like this is my 3rd year with Amplified, I'm like, finally, yes, I've got this, you know? So with the standards-based grading, it's the same thing, like we would love to have everything planned out, you know, at once, it's just not possible with time.
So could we do 3 years of pilot, like, cause then you'd have
Well,
that consistent.
paralleling,
Well, yeah,
right?
paralleling like you guys did last year.
So is it
Would
just
that
gonna
make
make you,
sense?
so it's
Just
just
so it's
ELA,
a
is it gonna
good-
make you more comfortable if at the end of a trimester, you see your child is on track in this standard, approaching this standard, and then I give them a C? Or
I'm just
you
seeing
need
it
to
more of a
see all the long-
consistency, you know, like, let's consistently do it for a couple years to see that growth together, where then we make the full change. Cause
So what
after
would your
one
preference
year,
look like?
you don't, well, you would have both, like, you would do it parallel. for
Right, so
ELA.
how would I take
Would that
my
be-
standards and give you a letter?
Then how'd you do it last year?
Last year, we just did 80-20, we didn't go by the standards.
Then how'd you pilot the standard?
Because we were starting to label it by standards, but we weren't, it was still 80-20. It was just saying that assessments were worth more than homework was worth. So it wasn't anything by standard. Like this year, it's gonna look totally different in ELA, because it's gonna be like, here's standard 1 and all the work they do within that standard. Here's standard 2, all the rest. That's like Lisa said. If she had to go right now and give a percentage, give a 74, she couldn't even do it. So while we make this next change, which I really hope you will get on board with, while we make this next change, like this is the step that needs to happen for us to start to see, okay, this is working or not. Because the 80-20 wasn't standards-based. It was just, we're starting to align our lessons to standards and giving parents what they want, what they're comfortable with knowing that they have a letter at the end of the day. So that was why we did what we did last year. Last year was not doing the standards like we were doing this year. This year is where you will really start to see that difference.
And I don't. if I can
Thank
just
you,
add one more
everyone.
thing, Just give food for thought.
Okay.
Act 20, which is
Yeah.
the law,
Uh-huh.
basically doing this as well. It's no longer saying, here's a screener, oh, yep, you're scoring at this point, and that's that. It's saying, here's your score, we must now do diagnostics and identify those skills. So again, everything's about the skills that students possess.
Okay, thank you.
With all that being said, I will make a motion to stop standard-based grading for middle school, including ELA, for 2024-2025 school year.
I will second that.
Can you clarify your motion to what grading scale you want to use? Is it?
The traditional grading scale.
Okay.
So stop standard-based grading for middle school, including ELA for 2024-2025 school year. Revert back to the traditional grading scale of the A, B, C, D, D, F, as we have had in the past. Can I get a second?
I'll second
All in favor, say aye.
that. Aye.
Aye. Any nays?
Nay.
Motion carries 3-2.
Sorry. Sorry.
Moving on to 4B, review of policy 5421.
As I mentioned, there's 5421A also, and I think we should line these up so that they're for clarity's sake.
I only have 5420. Oh, do you mean 5421A that's in the administrative guideline?
Yeah.
manual? Okay. Is anyone else hearing basketball?
There's volleyball
Is it,
practice.
okay, the way it comes in, I thought it was coming from in the corner with the way the acoustics are working. Okay,
Mm.
thank you. Okay.
Looking at policy 5421, does everyone have it? I guess I didn't put that. We don't have anything in the board doc, so I have a copy of it if you'd like to.
That's 5421?
Yes.
Or 54, I don't
This
have
is-
5421A.
This is
Oh.
just administrative guideline manual, it's not an actual
Oh.
recommendation.
Well, and that was actually adopted June of '23.
The administrative guidelines are different and not board approved.
Why would you adopt that last June?
You
I
best,
wasn't here.
you best explained how in our policy meeting, can you explain the difference between, sorry to do that to you, the administrative guidelines and then,
Can I close the door?
yes, yes,
I wanna
thank
do
you.
that. Thank you, I just wanna make sure.
It's so funny, it sounds to me like it's coming
It-
from.
it's
I think
the
it's
way that
echoing
the
off
acoustics
of-
are, yeah. I thought Tony honestly had something else playing on his computer and I was taking,
It's music.
yeah. I printed it.
So just the
Just
delin-
the
delineation.
the
that-
function of the,
Yes,
yeah.
not 5421.
No, just the function,
Right,
yeah.
so the state legislature puts out the state statutes that help guide and what is commonly referred to as the state law, right? Neola takes everything that we're supposed to do, not Neola, but then schools are supposed to take those state statutes and create policy, right? Policy is what the board votes on, whether it's through Neola or if they hire their own agency, that kind of thing, we'll talk about this. The school, the administrators are supposed to take the administrative guidelines, or take those state statutes, and then how we do that is the administrative guidelines. That's our guidance as administrators, how we make sure that our policy is in line with the state statute, so it's all, falling in line together. That's, we take, and then working our way back up again, that's how we create the handbooks. So whether or not, if the policy is based on employment, then it would, go through the professional employee handbook. If it has to do with grading, or something around students, it would be the student parent handbook. That would have to align with administrative guidelines, which have to align with the policy, which have to align with state statutes. And so that's just creates that vertical, delineation of how at each level it's, the state, DPI, the school boards, and the governance is the policy, administrative is administration, and then the handbooks would be the employees at that level. Does that help? All right.
Sort of.
It's tough.
And I think, part of the reason to review it is to review the two of them and make them line up better, so there's no confusion.
And that's also something that we had talked about in the policy meeting. So many of our policies, when we do a control F, a control find on them, and, we get really dialed in on one term that
Yeah.
becomes, polarizing in the greater community, and we would say we want to change that. And then you do a control F just on the policy, and you see how many other places within that policy that shows up, and then you go into administrative guidelines, and then we have to change handbooks, and then we have to do it vertically, going
Right.
back up to make sure that, okay, if we change that here, do we still have that continuity, that alignment with the state statute?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Okay, so,
The only
Is this something that the policy committee could take on?
well, it's actually, I
Well,
think it's a
yeah.
hot topic at the moment because it has everything
It
to
was
do
kind of
with
thrown in our face.
the program, yeah.
How do you mean?
Are you familiar with policy 5421? If not, I recommend getting familiar with it.
Uh-huh.
Who are you talking to?
Were you not at that meeting?
I'm answering your
Which meeting?
question. You asked, what do you
That's-
mean?
That's what we were told.
So you're referring to the conversation at the last meeting,
Correct.
and I want,
So what I'm suggesting, Danielle, is that there's no confusion, so that we make an amendment to this to parallel the A, and so that there are no questions in the future. Does that make sense?
but if you parallel, so if I want to make sure I'm tracking, because your concern with the grading scale was that it's moving too quickly. But if we move to parallel A, it's cementing that we would not review that for the time being, this is
Actually,
permanent.
what it's cementing is that the board has the final decision, and these things, these major things, should be discussed with the board on a regular basis. It should not be thrown in at the last minute right before a meeting. And
Or thrown in right before school starts.
whether it is grading or curriculum, I think the board has the right and actually the responsibility to do some research on everything. The financials that we get, and this is,
We didn't have time to research this.
we didn't have a
Last-
minute. So, yeah.
So, do you have
So-
proposed language for 5421 that we're doing a first reading for?
The only proposal would be on the third paragraph. It's the board with the district administrator to develop procedure for grading, the with,
Okay.
not just direct.
Sure.
And then at the last paragraph, the grade may not be changed without, hold on.
Okay, she's saying,
I think it was
the board,
The board believes,
You want
okay,
to give
the
them
third
the
paragraph,
rest?
the board with the district administrator instead of directing the district administrator. So it would be working together as a team.
okay.
And it says revision shall only be, oh wait, when the change is ensured to more valid, okay, hold on. That's it, with the district
Yeah.
administrator. You have other verbiage, Nicole?
I thought there was something else we changed.
It was, but when I read it, that's not correct. Changing of the teachers or the students' grade. So,
So we're looking to change from directs to with. Is that, and that's the only change on
correct, so it's done as a team.
5421,
54, yeah.
okay? And that's an editorial opinion, I just feel like that's the opposite of what we just did. We just decided not to take the expertise of the principal and the teachers we would work with.
Well, I think we actually
we
said
flexed.
there wasn't
Certain board
enough.
members flex their muscle, as opposed to listening to the educators.
I'm only
And
one.
I think if we're working with the district
grab me muscles,
administration, the
but-
administration, then we would have handled that totally differently, so I'm not sure.
Okay, well, that's going back on the topic, so let's worry about this policy now.
And so you all agree with the with?
Sure. Oh, I took a copy, your copy, as I wrote on it.
Oh, that was yours, actually. I didn't print one.
I printed one, it's on my printer.
And how's it gonna read again? I have the word with the district administrator to develop, that sentence doesn't make sense.
I guess I would say two things. I'm not opposed to the idea, you know me, I'm very pro-team. I'm
Right.
concerned about two things. One, this is working outside of the policy committee that was created. But then two, it seems that the three of you are all in agreement on this and brought it to the meeting for a change. And so,
I don't even
Well,
have it in my
actually-
possession.
Brought
I
a
don't have
copy.
it either. I didn't even know about this policy until it was presented to me to get to know during a meeting the
And I
week
printed
before
a
school.
copy 'cause it's on the.
yeah,
And it's upsetting the way it was presented, and it's even more upsetting than to look at the student handbook and find out that printed on July 1st, it already said that. And,
If you wanted to go into the policy committee, sure, it can go into the policy committee. Can you put that on the very first
Yep.
discussion?
I could put it on for next week.
Now we can move on. Going on to 4C.
We agreed?
yep.
Okay,
Yep.
excellent, thanks.
Answering Tina's question on the Google form, I asked a question on the Google form, which is what Jack requested. and he put on there that he needs board approval to answer my question. So I'm bringing it to the board. Can Jack please answer my question? My question being, regarding professional development expenses for 2023, 2024, what was the total? And which employees attended those events that would have taken them away from their classroom and/or attended during school hours? That was my question.
I make a motion to
Wait,
approve
so
that.
this is up for discussion, I think, this is a discussion point, right? Discussion
No.
and action point? It's a discussion and action point.
Sure. What's your,
Okay.
what's your,
Okay. Well, no, my question is, because this is a board decision now,
mhm.
why are you looking for this information? And did you ask how long it would take to pull this information together?
I gave
Can I
2
have my,
weeks.
DPI
to-
You gave
reports
them
back?
2 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's 3 of them.
But do you know
He
how
never-
many, do you know
he-
how many hours it would take to?
There's another one
That,
in your
that
stack
conversation was never,
Okay.
that question was
have
never
that one.
presented to me.
Okay.
The
and
only
re-
thing that was presented to me was, you need board approval for,
Okay, and the reason you're asking for this information?
because I wanna know,
Because,
I wanna know,
but I think as a singular board member,
because I wanna know.
in 2.5
That's the
years I've
question.
been on the board, you've never had a board member question things just because they wanted to know. I mean, there should be a reason.
You've
for
asked
asking.
plenty of
always
questions
had
for
a
what you
reason.
wanted,
And I've
because
always-
I wanna know, that's my reason.
That was never my reason.
Well, that's mine.
Well,
But
in,
that seems somewhat insane.
Call me insane, call me flexing my muscles, call me whatever you
I
want.
didn't call you insane. I
That
said
is my,
the-
that is my answer, that is my question.
well, I think we can all agree that Jack has been hot and cold with answering the questions on the Google Doc form. Can we agree on that? And it, you know, your questions, my questions might be silly to each other, but that's what we agreed upon was we would ask the questions, it would be on the Google Doc, so that everybody would have the answer and we wouldn't have to keep going back. I'm not
Email
asking the
after
same
email
question
after
as
email.
you and Stephen.
Sure.
So,
But as a board member, I think I have a responsibility to the board and to the school and to administration to help make certain that we're not asking for things that aren't needed and that a lot of administration's time. And so again, I ask why this
Okay, well,
information is
I'll go back to
needed.
him and ask him how much time does he think,
But again, I'd like an answer as to why it's needed.
Because I wanna
don't-
know.
I don't think we can vote on this
Well, I mean,
intelligently.
it
if
is
we
an
don't know
I think
expense
why
we
though
can.
that we
need
have
this
to approve,
information.
right?
I wanna
What's
narrow
that?
down
It
an
is an expense we
expense.
have to approve, right?
Again, I'm asking Tina because she fielded the question here.
'Cause I'd like to
And that-
know.
and that's
Well,
it.
I'm just thinking as another board member, I'm reading the question and it's an expense type of question, so why can't?
Is it an investigation? Tina?
Mm-mm.
It's not an investigation.
I'd like to know the answer to that. I'm not investigating anything, I'd like to know.
I'll make a motion that the district administrator should answer any of the questions the board posts on the Google Doc as previously agreed, including Tina's question about professional development expenses for 23-24 and which employees attended those events that would have taken them away from their classroom and/or attended during school hours.
So that's including all the questions that would be put on that Google Drive forever.
Well, isn't that the whole purpose of it?
That is the purpose of it.
Well, I think
correct.
there's some questions that we could pose as an
I made a
individuals-
motion. Nobody's
as an
gonna
in-
second
as
it?
individuals.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, let's take it for a
Why are
vote.
you shutting me down?
Because she
Because
asked,
you're
because
going
because
back
he
in
has
a
a motion.
circle.
No, but there's, no,
I
I'm
made
not
a
going back
motion.
in a circle. There's, we're continuing the discussion.
I
There's a
think
lot
we
of
had a
questions
motion
that an
and a
individual
second.
school board member could ask on that Google form
Mhm.
that probably shouldn't be asked because it would take too much time, or the rest of the board isn't interested in that. So to say that every single question should be answered, I don't think that's the case. I think
Well,
that
the-
he answered some of the questions stating that.
The only
board
question that
should
he's not
approve it.
answering is my question.
No.
Well, no, he
two on there
hasn't,
that-
he hasn't
that I
answered
have
anything in
That haven't
the
been
last
answered,
couple of weeks.
Okay,
and I understand his reasoning.
can you clarify the motion? Stephen is the reason why we have the clarity of the any question. So is it any, do you want us to vote on if it's any question ever put on the sheet, or can we just vote on this one particular?
We can vote on just this one.
That'd be, yes.
Okay, I make a motion that we require the district administrator to answer Tina's question on the Google form regarding professional development expenses for 23-24, and which employees attended those events that would have taken them away from their classroom and/or attended during school hours.
I will second that motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I'm gonna abstain
Any
because I
nays?
just don't have enough information to deal with
Okay.
it.
All right.
All right, moving
Annual
on
budget.
to
sorry.
4D. Annual budget review, the only reason why we came here. The initial reason why we came here. Sue,
Well, I gave you some, a lot of information. The revenue limit worksheet is the very first thing that you use when you're developing a budget. Because this gives you the bulk of the money that's going to come in. Whether that be through general state aid, which Bristol's allocation is going down. And it's going down by a lot. So much so that we're getting a little bit of help from the state to lessen the impact. But I wanted to show you the current FTE that we have calculated based on the first day of school. Matter of fact, it was not even the first day of school, it was a couple days before, the ones that had registered. So instead of going down 50 students, which would have been the trend, because we've gone down 12, and then we went down 34.
Which one of
So
these?
it would have been, this is the first one.
okay.
Oh, okay, thank you.
A lot of the funding that comes in is based on your current average students on the last 3 years.
Okay,
So if you go by the trend, we lost 12 students and then 35 students, and then we had it earmarked that it would be about 50 or 60 students. Well, it wasn't that great of a drop.
oh,
And then if you look down into the pink section on the bottom, that shows your TIF out tax apportionment equalized valuation. Basically, it's property values. And we estimated, along with the rest of the state, 7%. And if you look back at Bristol's history, except for when the TIF closed, it was generally around 6-7%. So it made sense. It came in at 17%, which actually kind of helps out with the mill rate. So then you go on to page 2, and this is where the deep calculations come into play. It's showing the low revenue ceiling that was passed by the legislators with the 11,000, and that we're getting an addition 325 in 24-25. It shows how much our revenue limit is. It shows the declining enrollment exemption of the 260,000. It shows how much we're paying for vouchers, school vouchers, private vouchers, and overall, what our allowable revenue limit will be, $5,181,700. So then we go over to the left side of number 14 and start figuring out where we have to plunk everything in. Our non-referendum debt, that is the debt payment that we're making, $50,658. We have to pay that. Our referendum approved debt is actually $1,544,000, but you see that figure of 2.356. That is with prepayment to maintain the mill rate. But once you get those two figures in, it will allow us to see how much we can use for Fund 10, our general operations, and that's $5,131,042. So So that's what I used when I was building this budget. But anyways, it gets you back to the 4.7
No, wait.
million. So I just wanted you guys to see that. The required published budget summary that we send off to the press is the first, 3 pages? 1, 2, 3, yeah. And it shows what the levy would be in comparison to the previous levies. And the only major, because Nicole and I talked about this, the only major, or was it Joanne?
I don't know.
No, it wasn't. It was Leslie. Leslie said, give me the major stuff that's really impacting your budget. This year, it's the child find services for the private school of $90,000 for site costs. So that's really
I have a question on that.
biting us. Huh.
Because I went to the DPI site and looked up the referral and what we're obligated to do. And now, that could be a slice of the pie, but what I found was a letter that says, we are only responsible to students that reside in our district outside of the school. So I asked Jack for any documentation, and I'm good with it, if in fact, but I want to see it, because
Yeah.
I do have in writing from them saying, for pupils who reside in your district.
We have met with Rachel Zellner from DPI because we didn't know enough about this. We don't have a private school. I mean, we never had a private school before. All of a
Yeah.
sudden, Open Wings moves in. So we met with Rachel Zellner, and she told us that our responsibility to the private school is to assess these children. So they
Uh-huh.
have
It-
38, but they were expecting maybe 50. And they have to be provided by law, child find services.
It does say that.
Yes.
And then it says in the letter, for pupils who reside in your district. I mean, again, I just take information off
I
of
will
there.
send the information to the board
Okay,
if you so desire, if the board desires. I'll send you the information since you don't believe me.
no,
And
I have a letter
can show
from
you
them
that
too.
DPI is requiring us to do this.
Yeah. I have it, I mean, I found, like I say, you know what reading DPI is like. It's 5 million pages and you have to look for the needle in the haystack. So the letter that I found says they have to reside. I would like to just give services to every child, but I think we,
We do not
the
have
reason
to
I was,
provide services this year. The only service we have to provide is the child find
Eval.
services, which is the assessment of special ed, whether or not they're special ed. Next year, we actually need to provide the services that DPI tells us we have to, but they will provide us with some funds. When the funds run out, we are no longer required to provide those services. So if it only covers 3 students out of 25, the other 22 don't receive the services from us.
okay.
Now,
So the initial
parents-
hit is the assessment
Yeah. the
this year.
initial hit,
of possibly
Initial
50
hit.
children.
yeah.
Okay.
This is a K-12 school, so Central does have some students that may be there.
Yeah,
But we haven't spoken to them yet. We just received notification today that we can have an agreement with Central as to who takes it on, who takes on the LEA, but it can only be one district. Only one
Okay.
district does that. And it
Okay.
has to be an agreed upon
Hmm.
responsibility.
Again, sometimes logic doesn't come into play with decisions on any level, but it seems a private school and they get $44,000 per child. And they're special education, which is terrific that it's there, but when we look at our spending cap per child, and then we have to take out of that to give over there, it just on a logic level, it feels like a school that is specifically for that purpose and has much greater funds than we have should have their own program. But again, I get it, doesn't always make sense. Okay, and I'm sorry I derailed you.
I know, it kind of messed up the budget. I don't like when outside sources mess up the budget. So anyway, this published budget summary shows that we are gonna end up, what, 160,000 more at the end of 23-24. Now, this is the most updated figures that we have. Most updated figures that we have. So I do not have all the auditor's adjustments at the current time, which he's always good for 10 of them. And the budget for 24-25 currently shows 51,200, up 150 into the fund balance.
Will you
I
repeat
lost you
that?
there.
About 52,000, somewhere around 52,000 into the fund balance if we spend every single dime of the budget. And I did not pad substitutes this year. It's just things went up. And snow removal was a big one, that was double the amount of last year.
And if you missed it, if you repeated that, my apologies, but for the non-recurring exemption amount, the 260, which we hope to receive, how confident are you in that number? Like 50%?
That is calculated. When
Okay,
you enter
because with
other
the
stuff-
enrollment, so that's like the more concrete number?
Yeah, that
Okay.
I don't get to enter that. The only stuff I get to enter are in the pink.
Oh, I guess I was talking about the declining enrollment exemption.
That's the
But that's defined. Okay, awesome,
260,475.
that's,
Yeah.
okay, great.
Yeah. Anything green is automatically calculated.
Great.
Anything yellow is previous data. I should have explained this before I read it to you. And the pink is the only place that I can actually put figures.
Got it.
So that stuff can change. The state aid can change. Now, the computers, exempt computers and exempt personal property that the legislators had talked about removing, nope, we got letters verifying we're getting those funds this year, so we're
That's
okay.
nice.
Yeah.
For
yeah, I
once,
thought it was
good news
good.
on that.
And it's more than previous year. So those are solid numbers. The non-referendum debt is a solid number. The $1,544,000 we have to pay for the referendum debt is a solid number. So all the other stuff is guesstimates.
All right, so,
Now, the last thing I have in there
Yep.
is the budget adoption
Yep.
packet, and this is just for the board. It gives you a more detailed look at the revenues and the expenditures, which we actually highlight at the annual meeting on the presentation, but we don't put that out.
Okay.
Because it makes more sense to highlight it and show everybody what this is rather than just giving them a piece of paper and say, figure it out.
Okay.
so this is a lot to digest, of course, tonight.
Yes,
Would you
it
rather,
is.
would you rather have questions from individual board members if we have questions prior to the annual meeting? Or would you prefer us, if we have any questions, to ask them at the annual meeting, at the
Oh,
budget adoption?
Prior to would be great.
Okay, good, okay, I just wanted to make sure. Okay, terrific.
Thank you.
Terrific. So again, just to reiterate, so we're looking for 24-25 at expenditures at approximately $51,000 more than revenues. But the fund balance percentage, we're still hitting, in my head very quickly, about 31%,
Yes, it is.
32%, which is
A
still
very healthy fund balance.
excellent, very healthy. Okay. Okay, and again, I'm sure this is a lot, I'm sure I'll have some questions, but thank you for all the information.
Yes, thank you for, I know it was a lot of work, so we appreciate it.
Yeah, I was scrambling till the last minute. Joanne get the brunt of that.
When will this budget be actual, like, published?
It'll be
What
published
date?
this week. It'll be sent to the paper, so it can be published this week. Probably Sunday or Monday.
It'll be sent Sunday or Monday, or
No,
it'll be?
it'll be published Monday. I think, is it Monday that they publish legals?
Okay.
So it'll be online faster than it'll be in the actual paper. Does anybody get an actual paper?
We do. I like doing the
I still
crosswords
miss
every day.
Let me guess, you still have a checkbook too. I'm kidding.
I do, so.
I'm kidding.
I don't know where that
Sit
is.
there on the back patio with my mom and read the Sunday paper. Just tear it apart. It's so much fun.
I just like the ad so you can circle what you wanted. That was the best.
We do the
Can you
crosswords,
send this
but
to
only
us
the
online?
Thursday.
Can you send
The
the board
revenue
members?
limit worksheet?
Yeah,
Sure.
all three of these.
All three of them?
Yeah, yeah, if you could. Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, agreed. We'll probably all have questions. And hopefully we have similar ones, so you can do like you did with mine last time, is just, say, Joanne wanted to know how many.
But Tina, do you want those
Blah, blah,
these
blah.
questions to go on the Google form? or-
No,
No.
because she can't see them.
Okay, so
Only
you can
Jack
send
can
these
see those.
directly to Susan.
Yes.
Or do you want me to have Jean load them up on today's agenda for the board? And then you guys can have them there at all.
Or as far as you say, no, that would be great.
Yeah, if you
opposed
can
to
put it
send-
in the
opposed to
BO.
Emailing us, if that's okay with.
And the
Eve.
BOE folder,
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
that way then we can
Thank
always.
you for
don't have
scrambling to do
access
that.
where email is.
I told you about that dodgeball game. All right.
So does this show us, I'm sorry, maybe you already gave us, I apologize.
No, go ahead.
Keeping the levy at $4, or the mill rate at $4.70, how much will, does it show in here how much we'd be prepaying debt?
No, it doesn't. It's the difference between
The 150, or the
the
million, or
2356604 and 1544444.
15A.
So like
And why do I
800 so
remember
like
that?
eight-
Because that's a very unique number.
So like $800,000?
Yes,
Wow.
we have that much of a gap that we could have used for operating expenses, but we can't because
Right,
we
because the
didn't pass
revenue.
it.
All right, so I'm sorry, which numbers are they again? Where are you pulling those numbers? Are they on this form?
Well, you wouldn't know the number of the loan payment.
All right, well, hold on, let me write this down. Thanks.
I'll send it to you.
Okay, if you could do that, that would be great. Is that, I mean, that's huge. That's huge. Taxpayers should be happy.
All right, any other questions on the annual board budget review, which we'll see shortly?
Well, probably, I think we agreed, we probably will all have questions.
I mean,
But not
I mean,
for
questions
today.
at the moment, sorry, I
No.
guess I should reiterate that. All right, then moving on to number 5, convey into closed session. The board will convey into closed session under Wisconsin statute 19.85, section 1, section C, considering employment, promotion, compensation of performance evaluation, data of any public employee over which governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
We have to vote to go in.
Yep.
No.
All in favor of going into closed session, say aye.
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 Sorry.
Any nays?